Welcome to Insights in Touch, the podcast where industry insight meets meaningful conversation. Hosted by Kristin Thorne, this series, presented by iFraud Foundation, explores the real issues facing the property and casualty insurance world. It's the pulse of an industry under pressure and the voices working to protect its future. Stay informed, stay connected, stay in touch. Now, here's your host, Kristin Thorne.
Today on the Insights in Touch podcast, we have Kevin Habberfield. The name of your law firm is Black, Lyle, and Habberfield. Thank you so much for joining us, Kevin.
Thanks for having me, Kristin.
And I know you're coming into the lion's den here, but we really appreciate it. Kevin is a personal injury lawyer, and we were put in touch with him over LinkedIn, and he's been engaging in some of the conversations. And I'm so happy that you took this opportunity to speak with us, because we do want, and me, especially as a journalist, want to understand all of the sides of everything. And that is genuine. It really is. And so I'm very happy that you have come on board today to kind of talk a little bit about fraud, what you see happening in the plaintiff and the injury space, what you're seeing there in your own firm, and then just generally about what's happening legislatively here in New York. So let's start first. Fraud exists. Fraud has existed forever in insurance and in injury. What do you think of it? What is your perspective on it now that it has gotten so kind of a hot topic in New York?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. And thank you again. Frauds exists in all aspects of life, not necessarily just this. I mean, there's always going to be someone that, wants to take advantage or try to game the system, for lack of a better term. But I'm here in upstate, so I'm not dealing with a lot of the downstate issues that some of the attorneys down there have. We really don't see fraud, not in a way that we can identify anyway. So yes, it definitely exists, and it is an issue. I just don't think it's necessarily as much of an issue as the governor is making it out to be. And I certainly don't think the proposals that she has on the table right now to address it will help.
Tell me why. Why do you think that?
Well, for example, she wants to change the comparative fault system. And Pennsylvania has a modified comparative fault system. I practice down there too. And if you're more than 50% at fault for a crash down there, you get zero. And here in New York, you could be 99% at fault and you could still get a recovery. But the difference is that your damages will be reduced by your own negligence. So if you're 99% at fault and the jury awards you $100, you're going to get $1. You can't get, I guess, compensated for your own stupidity, for lack of a better term. So what I'm concerned about with, say, for example, changing to the modified comparative negligence is you can have a scenario where someone is, say, 49 and 51% at fault, and they could be terribly hurt. They could be a quadriplegic, and in that scenario, even though the other driver was also at fault, that person's going to get zero and immediately go to Medicaid when they could have stayed in the no fault system. And then all of us, all the taxpayers, end up footing the bill for someone else's negligence. Sorry. So that's an example of where I don't think the comparative fault proposal, I don't think that's going to curb fraud in any way.
I guess the other side of it is, and this is going to your point we talked about before we started taping, is that if there is rampant fraud, which at least downstate, like in New York City, this is why you have Uber and others kind of ride shares getting in on some of these RICO lawsuits. I've seen some of the videos. I mean, they are pretty egregious. I think, when those are settled for nuclear amounts, then the taxpayer is still paying more because we're paying more in our rates. So I agree with your other point that you were going to make, that maybe there's a different thing to do with this money. What do you think?
Yeah. So, and we did talk about this off air. My proposals for resolving this are a few. One, why don't we get more resources for the police and the district attorneys to prosecute these things? All this fraud has been illegal forever. You know, another law isn't going to do anything to solve that. But if you actually have someone enforcing the ones that already exist, you might see some changes. So I would like to see if fraud is really on the governor's agenda and she truly cares about doing something about it, she needs to give people the resources that can actually affect change there. And adding another law that may or may not be enforced, I don't see how that helps when we've got fraud laws on the books that could be enforced right now and could address this. The other things I think would be nice is dash cameras and utilizing technology. Um, you know, if people are getting a discount on their insurance because they have a dash camera, my car has one installed with it. It came with it from the factory, which I think is probably the way that they'll all be going forward. But if you go out and actually purchase one and install it, you should get a discount because um, there's no more he said, she said, he said type situations. You just watch it. This is what happened. And you could then take that video if someone makes a claim and turn it over to the district attorney. And now you got yourself a pretty good criminal case.
Mm-hmm.
So there are things that can be done to address it. I think the governor's position on it is a little disingenuous. And I think the proposals that she submitted just aren't going to move the needle when it comes to fraud.
Mm-hmm. No, I don't disagree that and I hear this a lot and I understand it. There are a lot of laws on the books. They clearly have not done anything. And I agree with you that if they could put more money into having fraud units in the DA's office, because the DA's offices are aware of what's going on. They've seen some of these videos. They know it's happening. But I don't know if I'm sure you can imagine, as someone who's investigated this fraud, it is very complex. It involves a lot of work. Like, this is not a deliver on a silver platter type of thing. It is it's very complex, a lot of different characters and how they're related. And so I do agree with you that that would be a great place to start. Um, what else do you think, like from the fraud? Now, you don't see a lot of it in your practice. When you have seen it, when you've been reading about it now, you've seen some videos yourself.
Yep.
You know, what do you make of? And I don't want to put you in an awkward position. I really don't, because I know this is what you do. But you seem like you have a very level head about. How this should be working and how lawyers should be dealing with it. And look, there are bad actors in every field, right? There are journalists that I know that I disagree with some things that they do, right? Tell me about that.
So, are you asking me to talk to you about some instances where I've actually heard about fraud taking place or something like that?
Yeah, like, well, where you feel like, you know that attorneys shouldn't be litigating things that they know are false, and getting these nuclear verdicts that people quite frankly don't deserve.
Yeah, then I'm gonna take it in two parts. I'm gonna do the second part first.
Okay.
Um, at the end of the day, the verdict that an attorney gets, is based on a jury of six people who sat there and listened to evidence. And, I usually tell people like if they are upset about a verdict amount or maybe the outcome of the case based on what they heard about it, knowing that they weren't there and didn't hear everything. I usually tell them like, okay, imagine those six jurors are you and your cousin or your neighbor. Like, typically you're gonna get six reasonable, level-headed people. Not always. But to get six people to agree to anything is is pretty difficult. And if they're agreeing to a number that seems to be large, or at least is large in from the standpoint of the person that's hearing it, you got to remember that at the end of the day, it was six people, six citizens from the state of New York, just like the rest of us. And there must have been something in that case or something about that case that made them want to do that.
Mm.
Like I it bothers me when I hear, like, I think I heard Governor Hochul say, like, six jurors that aren't paying attention.
Mm.
Some, granted, some of them don't, but most people, when they take that oath, they take it seriously and they'll listen to the evidence. The last one that I did, I lost, and the jury never, not one of them fell asleep. They listened the entire time. They were attentive. Um, and admittedly, what we do isn't all that fast paced, and the law kind of lags behind everybody trying to get everything done in 30 seconds. But um, so that's what I would say about that. Like, usually, if you see a big number, and you hear the facts and you go, no way, there's something you're missing. There's something someplace that that just it didn't come out. It wasn't reported on.
No,
Oftentimes,
that's fair. We have a jury system here, and they decide what they think the verdict should be. And then maybe Kevin, what you're saying is that, look, if maybe defense attorneys have to get better at what they're doing, they have to hit these points that they know. And I know I hear from the defense side a lot about educating the jury pool about insurance fraud, and that could be something they could be doing, right? Like, maybe there needs to be more of that out there. But certainly, if maybe there's something that defense attorneys are missing, it's just not resonating with the jury.
yeah, and sometimes, like, you put your case on and they just go, nah, I'm not buying it. Like, they either don't believe the experts or the plaintiff or the defendant, or there's just something about it that they just don't agree with. And if if fraud really is um, concerning in a case, like, the defense attorney should investigate that. They should spend some resources on it and make it part of the case. I can tell you, in the 18 years I've been doing this, I've never had fraud raised in one of my cases.
Wow.
So it's out there for sure, but it's not something that ever becomes part of the case. Now, you will have someone saying, "Oh, look, I just don't believe the plaintiff, or I don't believe the defendant." Um, but to go as far as say it's fraud, that just doesn't seem to happen, at least in Western New York. Um, so it's a little different for us, I think, here than maybe downstate. And it also, from what I saw, it looks like the vast majority of the fraud is in the no fault context more
Hmm.
so than it is the liability context.
Right.
Because of what you said, it is, to pull it off in a liability context, you gotta trick a lot of people. You gotta trick the adjuster or the defense attorney or the plaintiff's attorney or the police or an investigator, a jury of six, a judge, a bunch of medical doctors, to get past all those people. That's 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 pretty difficult. Not impossible,
Right.
but pretty difficult. Um, I'm sorry, I went on so long about the nuclear.
No, no, no. And I know I forget what the second thing we were going to talk about was, but that's okay. We got off on a tangent, which is something I definitely have a tendency to do.
That's
Maybe I
okay.
should work on that as a podcast host.
Yeah, I bet. I bet.
Keeping people and myself organized. But I'm so interested in everything you're saying because I agree with many of the points that you're making. Let's talk about the idea of the billboard attorney. We see these, and I mean, I guess I used to see these ads a lot, but now that I'm in this space, I really see them. Especially when I was down in Florida a few weeks ago. Oh my goodness, they are everywhere.
Yeah.
What do you make of that?
I mean, look, my firm doesn't advertise. We're on the internet because I think you have to if you want to stay in business. Um, every now and again, we might put something in a newspaper, or most of the time they're fundraisers where they'll sell you a half page ad, and you can donate it. The funds go to a charity of some kind. I'm anti-advertising when it comes to attorneys. I know a lot of people do it. Um, it's just not something I'm ever going to do. I feel like if you're a professional, um, that's not something that you should be doing. But I feel the same way about doctors that advertise. I don't think they should be doing it.
Right.
If you're good, people will find you. And um, unfortunately, the Supreme Court doesn't agree with me. So here we are. And look, I'm not saying, look, I know many attorneys that work for some of those firms that advertise, and they're phenomenal attorneys. There are some phenomenal ones there. It's just more, I find it unappealing, and I'm not going to do it. So,
Well, I agree with you on that for sure. What else? Anything else you want people to know about the fraud space, how you see it, things that may be out there that you think at least on the personal injury side, may be misunderstood by the defense side?
um, I mean, I guess maybe the one thing I would say is there there are instances where I think fraud gets thrown around a little too much.
Hmm.
Not everything is fraud just because you don't like it or don't agree with it, or the facts don't line up in a way that you think that they should. I think if that word was used a little bit less or maybe more sparingly and saved for cases where it really is happening or it might be happening, then it would have a little more credibility and a little more power behind it. I do think it's getting thrown around more so now, maybe than ever. And that, to some extent, I think takes away some of its power.
Hmm.
Um, so I would just say, I mean, like I told you, my wife is an insurance defense attorney, and we have some wonderful conversations
You must.
about this stuff. But, like she'll talk to me about a case, and every now and again I'll be like, geez, that doesn't sound right. You should be looking into that, right? It just doesn't line up. And other times she'll be talking about a fact pattern, and it'll be a case that I had. Be like, let me tell you what happened there, and I'll explain it. And like, oh, it's just kind of like the sort of thing that sometimes it's hard to consider. And we also, because the nature of our beast is adversarial, we always want to win.
Hmm.
And I always tell people, like, my mom has told me, like, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. If you've got a case, a personal injury case on a plaintiff's side that's nonsense, don't bring it. And if you've got a meritorious claim on the defense side, treat it like it's meritorious. And, if you can carve out a lot of the vitriol and just stick to trying to do what is right, um, sometimes I think maybe some of the stuff goes away, and things are a little easier for everyone. And then you can go to war on the one that you think is fraud. You know, do it when it's justified, um, and and then you sleep great at night. Um,
I have a feeling you sleep really well at night.
yeah, I sleep okay.
Yeah.
Um,
But you're right, putting all of the resources into the ones that really are clearly fraud. I think a lot of the defense side would love to see more now, examples of some of the ones that, they've uncovered that are just true fraud. And we haven't seen those prosecutions. I think there's growing frustration on the defense side because sometimes even with the videos, with all the evidence, it's just not. And I think it's because as someone who has covered crime for 22 years and knows how DAs work, it's a lot to get cases like this across the finish line.
it's a
They're just,
resource
yeah,
issue, right? I mean,
totally.
if they had more resources, more bodies, more ability to go through the evidence, they would probably get more of these things done. And honestly, too, if 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 the defense bar becomes aware of a common fraud scheme that's being done, then they need to communicate that to people so they're on the lookout for it and they know how to react. Um, and usually, I always joke like we never lose in this law firm. We either win or we learn.
Hmm.
That's it. And if you're really looking to combat fraud and you do become aware of schemes like the coyote cases and that sort of thing, get the word out so that whoever is going to see it next can marshal evidence or resources or do whatever they can to try and catch it, stop it, prevent it, or if nothing else, get it prosecuted. Um, fraud's a real thing, but I don't, like I said before, I don't think any of the proposals the governor has on the table are going to do anything to address it.
Fair enough. Well, Kevin Habberfield, personal injury lawyer, thank you so much for joining us today. I
Thanks for having
really,
me.
really enjoyed picking your brain and talking to you.
Can I add one more thing?
Yeah,
Would you ever consider so I didn't know what iFraud was,
yeah,
and because Damien is smart and engaging, he lured me into
good.
a back and forth on LinkedIn one day. Um, but so after that, I went on to the iFraud website,
Yeah,
and I didn't see any plaintiffs' attorneys. And I think there might be a misconception about our role in it. And admittedly, I bet you there are some plaintiffs' attorneys who would just turn a blind eye and roll forward with a case they know is nonsense. I'm not blind to that stuff. But I think you'd also find that you might get some plaintiffs' attorneys that are interested in helping to
yeah,
stop fraud and
yeah,
would be willing to work with you guys to do that.
yeah. I'm gonna make sure he'll be listening, so he'll know that, and I will
I
reiterate.
didn't say me.
Would you like to come on the board?
I just said there might
Volunteer?
be someone out there.
No,
Um,
no, no, I get it. I think that, like you said, I mean, like you're alluding to here, both sides have to find common ground in this, and that's the only way that it's truly gonna be solved. And maybe the answer is putting all of the energy that's gone into to fighting the bad actors,
yeah,
whether it be the claimants themselves, the doctors, the lawyers, but really narrowing in on that, because I do think that having some criminal prosecutions here would help overall, just kind of quiet everything down, at least for a little bit, and reset so that people understand that this is a crime and it is going to be taken seriously. It's just like right now there isn't a lot of that happening.
yeah. There was recently a case. I want to say it's in Louisiana.
It is.
You know about this?
Oh yeah. I
So
just
I saw that, and I'm surprised Damien didn't jump on. I saw it on LinkedIn, and I just wrote, throw the book at them.
Yeah.
And, like if you've got something like that going on, hammer it,
Yeah.
and it should have a chilling effect on the next knucklehead who thinks that they can get away with it, you know. Um, but you got to have some of those, and like I said before, you got to dedicate some resources to it.
Yeah.
So
Totally. Well, Kevin Habberfield, thank you so much for joining us today.
thanks.